Hello, my lovely lot. I thought today would be a brilliant day to go through one of my favourite subreddits, which is r/AskFeminists, because it's a little bit of a hellhole, but it's my hellhole, and I'm okay with that. So what we're going to do, I've got 5 posts up, I think. They're pretty recent on the subreddit. They have some discussion on them. I'm going to read them through, put them on the screen for you to read them through, and then I'm going to discuss it. Feel free to discuss this in the comments. It's my absolute favourite thing when people do that. I genuinely love it. That's why I do these. It's just so I can have a conversation with each one person. Yeah, some of them make me want to pull my hair out. Some of them are just really good discussions and topics. So we're going to have a little look. Also, I couldn't not film when I looked hot. So I'm also getting Invisalign soon. I'm really excited about it. Our first one is liberal ideas about dating someone reinforce the same toxic masculinity they oppose. I've been thinking about how even groups that support liberal and feminist ideas can sometimes unintentionally reinforce the same harmful patterns they aim to fight, especially when it comes to the way we talk about men, dating, and self-worth. People often say things like, he's single because he doesn't respect women, or if he treated women better, he'd have a partner. On the surface, this sounds like holding men accountable, but in practice, it just feels like a flip version of the old nice guys versus bad boys narrative. Instead of the bad boys get the girls, it becomes good feminist allies get the girls. The core idea stays the same. A man's value is determined by how successful he is with women. This framing treats romantic relationships like a moral reward system. If you're good, you get love. If you're bad, you don't. But dating isn't a meritocracy. It's shaped by so many things: timing, luck, social skills, class, appearance, and mental health, and not always within anyone's control. When it comes to incels or socially isolated men, a lot of people reduce their loneliness to personality flaws. Of course he's single, just look at how he acts. But that logic ignores the circularity of the situation. Often the behaviour people criticise is the result of years of rejection, isolation, and unmet emotional needs. It becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, and let's be honest, there are plenty of abusive, manipulative, or misogynistic men who still have partners, so clearly being a bad person doesn't automatically make someone undateable. The idea that people get what they deserve in love is comforting because it implies that the world is fair, but in reality, love and connection often hinge more on luck, privilege, and circumstance than moral character. Many people are single not because they're bad, but because they're shy, awkward, struggling financially, or dealing with trauma. Sometimes it's just bad luck. The deeper issue here is that this way of thinking doesn't actually challenge toxic masculinity, it just rebrands it. It still measures a man's worth by how attractive or desirable he is. It just uses progressive language to decide who deserves to feel worthy. And that's not liberation, it's a reshuffling of the same hierarchy. I think part of this becomes from how some modern feminism, especially online, leans heavily on the idea that all harmful behaviour is learned and can be unlearned. That's a powerful concept, but it often overlooks the fact that things like the desire for love, the pain of rejection, and the need to feel seen are not always learned, they're just human. And when men express these feelings, especially if they do it awkwardly or outside socially approved norms, they're often treated as threats rather than people in pain. There seems to be little room for men to express vulnerability without being judged. If a man shows sadness, he's called bitter. If he's angry, he's labelled dangerous. If he's lonely, people assume he's doing something wrong. We should always be able to acknowledge male pain without moralising it or excusing harmful behaviour. We need a way to talk about these things that recognise emotional suffering as real and not a flaw. I'm curious if anyone else has noticed this trend. Is it just me? When I read the title of that, I thought it was going to be discussing like the stereotypical, masculine things, and that's all that women like. Women only want a tall, strong 6-foot man. And then when I actually read further into it, I just realized that this guy has no idea what feminists actually think. When he says, like feminists, especially online, leans heavily on the idea that all harmful behaviour is learned and can be unlearned. It's a powerful concept, but it often overlooks the thing that they're just human and it's biological. Now, but within feminism, if you look to like TERF feminists, you will see that they believe in something called biological determinism, which is the idea that male characteristics like stereotypical male characteristics like violence and anger are biological. It's an inherent trait all men will have from birth. But in reality, it's most likely taught. And many studies have shown that it is in fact taught, and that men aren't just born aggressive and born violent. Yes, they have high levels of testosterone, so they are, and that contributes to aggression levels. But also the men who are taught from a young age that being aggressive isn't a good thing and you can't just shout at people to get what you want aren't going to be as aggressive and aren't going to shout at people to get what they want. And the line of, and when men express these feelings, especially if they do it awkwardly or outside socially approved norms, they're often treated as threats rather than people in pain. To pair that with the line, if a man shows sadness, he's called bitter. If he's angry, he's labeled as dangerous. If he's lonely, people assume he's doing something wrong. Those two lines together, the OP is trying to write this from, I think women think this, but what he's actually doing is, if you went around and asked a bunch of women and said, if you find a man who expresses his sadness and his anger and he's lonely, what are you going to think of him? And they're going to say he's a human being with emotions, and they're not going to think he's doing something wrong or he's a threat or dangerous. But men will, because men think that women see an emotional man and automatically go into fight or flight mode and think that he's a dangerous individual. Now, do a lot of women assume that a lot of men are dangerous? Yes. Why is that? It's because of patterns throughout history that will repeat and repeat forever of violence against women. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every single time, and because this is what OP's saying, that every time a man is anything other than perfect, women are against him. And that's not true. That's definitely not true. In fact, most women will seek a partner who is very in touch with their emotions and very open about those things. So if he's sad, he's not going to be called bitter by the women in his life. They're going to sit down and talk about it. Now, this actually goes into another post that I'm going to read about later, about men not turning to other men for sympathy. And this OP is a perfect example of why men don't do that. It's why men turn to women when they're upset, when something's an issue, because if they turn to men, there are men like this in the world who exist that will turn around and say, well, you're doing something wrong. Women are going to think you're bitter. Women are going to think that you're dangerous because you're sad and you have anger sometimes. And it's not true. It's 100% not true. The bit at the beginning that pissed me off so bad, he says, instead of bad boys get the girls, it becomes good feminist allies get the girls. The core idea stays the same. A man's value is determined by how successful he is with women. Neither of those statements, especially not the second one, place a man's value on how successful he is with women. In fact, the second one places the value on whether he's a respectful and decent individual. He's single because he doesn't respect women isn't a bad thing to say. In fact, that's a brilliant thing to say. And he says on the surface, this sounds like we're holding men accountable, but actually it's just still perpetuating this toxic masculinity, patriarchal standard on men. It's not. If you are a good person and you love and respect the women in your life and you're kind to them and you treat them like human beings, bare minimum, can I just say this is bare minimum, you're going to be more successful with women. And then when he says, this is true, dating isn't a meritocracy, it's based on so many things, timing, luck, social skills, class, appearance, mental health, and not always in anyone's control. That is 110% true. If you're a depressed individual and you don't leave your house as much, you're probably not going to find a girlfriend as easy as someone who walks out of their house every day and goes clubbing. Timing, luck, social skills, class, and appearance will all affect your ability to find someone, but nothing will affect your ability to get a long-term loving partner, be in a healthy relationship, like being a respectful individual, having compassion and having empathy and treating women like people. Baseline, that's what we look for, which is depressing. And he kind of dips into incel culture a little bit in the middle that says that logic ignores the circularity of the situation. Often the behavior people criticize is result of years of rejection, isolation, unmet emotional needs, and it becomes a self-perpetuating circle. That's true, but obviously that's not just for men, but it is actually mostly for men in situations like that this guy's talking about. Let's say this only affects men. It never has to continue if the men in this man's life reach out and support him, or even the women in his life, but that's more likely going to happen than the men in his life. But posting shit like this online isn't going to help these men who have had years of rejection, isolation, unmet emotional needs. Because by you posting this and saying, you're not going to have any luck, buddy, I hate to break it to you, but women aren't going to like you because you're not 110% perfect all the time. And women don't care anyway because they're just, rewriting toxic masculinity, and it doesn't matter, and your worth is only if you get a good woman or not. You're not going to help them. That's just not helping anyone. And I understand it comes from a place of probably confusion and he just wants to know what's going on. I understand, but the way it's written is very nice guys, incel-y, and I hate it. Next, okay, this one says, Why do men always ask women for support and not other men? Before I begin, I just want to say that I'm genuinely asking this in good faith based on my experiences. In my experience with this patriarchal society, men only ever value the opinions of and relationships with other men. So why is it that when they're down on their luck, men always turn to women for help? I can't count the amount of times on one hand that a man has walked past other men to approach me where I'm sitting to ask for food, money, or at times I've walked past a man panhandling in a group of other people and they call out to me instead of any of the men that are walking by. I'm currently homeless myself, and I guess I look like it because I've been discriminated against for it. Business refusing to allow me to use their bathroom even though I'm a paying customer. It strikes me as odd that a man will sooner ask an obviously homeless woman for help before they ask a well-off looking man for help. They'd rather take money out of my pocket than another man's pocket. This also goes for other forms of support besides financial. For example, emotional support. I've wasted dozens of hours of my life playing therapist to many different men of different ages and relationship types, but no man has ever listened to me vent about my problems or feelings for even 30 seconds. In fact, they treated all my problems like a personal inconvenience to them, yet those same men still claim to suffer in silence. So I've started to feel like my emotional labour was being taken advantage of and went unappreciated. In my life personally, men have only ever asked for my help and never offered any. It's strange to me considering the way they seem to disregard women in every other sense, but when they need something, the first person they go to is a woman. It makes me feel like men only value the worth of a woman when she has something they want to take from her, and that makes me very sad. I want to be a true feminist, and part of that is caring about men's issues and building bridges between genders, but I'm very reluctant to do so because the men I've known have only ever taken advantage of me doing so in the past. You can say it's not all men, but it's definitely every man I have ever met, so what am I supposed to do going forward? This is one of the best written posts on Ask Feminists that I have ever read, because I relate to this in such an insane way that every man I have had a close relationship with or friendship with, other than my father and my current boyfriend, has acted this way. If we have had the sort of friendship in which they come to me and they talk about things and they open up to me and they cry and whatever, I will always be there for them. And I say, you need to go and talk to someone about this, you need to do, and they'll say no. Especially if I say go to one of your guy friends, they'll always say no, but I've never had the space to open up about my experiences. And I do truly believe that this is because of the stereotype of women as caregivers and the fact that we do tend to be more empathetic. I'm not saying that in a hateful way, I'm saying that in a maternal, nurturing way. And something that a man commented that really stood out to me was, I don't think it's likely that men will get more comfortable asking men for help before men become better caregivers overall. And it is because of the stunted emotional maturity of men in modern society. Not all men. Don't come for me, not all men, I understand, but this links back to the first post that we read when OP said that if you're sad, you're bitter, if you're angry, you're dangerous, you're doing something wrong if you're lonely. And it's not true. And women read it, and the women in the comments were saying that's not true. But men refuse to accept that as the truth and still try and play off their own narrative as the truth and nothing but the truth. Someone said the sentence of, if he fails to treat her like a person, her own internal world doesn't matter to him. And this kind of goes on from the other post, because while it is true that men suffer, everyone suffers, men suffer, they are not going to turn to other men. They're not going to turn to other men because when men say boys shouldn't cry, when men say it's why are you crying, you're such a pussy, that's so gay, all this stuff, that's coming from other men. They've heard that from other men, whether that be their friends, their dads, their granddads, their uncles, whatever, men online, Andrew Tate. They've heard it from other men. They've heard other men say, don't cry, men don't cry, toughen up, grow a pair. And now they're perpetuating that same stigma on other men and then have the audacity, first OP, to turn around and say that women are the ones who are saying that emotional men are bitter, dangerous, or doing something wrong. And you owe nothing to men in your life who don't reciprocate the same level of care and compassion that you give them. You are absolutely nothing to them because clearly they are, someone said this as well, using you as an appliance, and the function they're getting from this appliance is sympathy. I've had men in the past who were my friends use me for sympathy, and it's incredibly draining and damaging for your own mental health when you look back and you realize, hey, this person actually wasn't trying to form a deep personal friendship with me and a deep connection with me. They were using me for sympathy, and they won't turn to the other men in their life because society has told them that men need to be tough and that men need to be, and it's not society actually that tells them that. The patriarchy tells them that men need to be tough, and what happens is that men think they need to be tough, so then they don't confront their own emotions, and then they get into bad relationships with women, and the women are harmed, and it's a huge massive cycle that just goes over and over and over and over again and never ends. And as this OP said, it is women who are bearing the brunt of it. And I saw another comment that said, that's pretty interesting because one of the most common complaints amongst men are, I spend days upon days listening to her vent about everything between heaven and earth, but the one time I opened up about feeling sad, she left me or used it against me in an argument. And I'm not going to sit here and say that all women are perfect, because they're not. There are some really, really horrible and shitty women out there who are probably using things like when you bring up your emotions in an argument, probably using it against you at some point. And that's horrible and incredibly unfortunate, and those women suck. But I can also nearly guarantee you that some of the women who've been in those situations where it's like, I opened up to her once and she left me. I complained about one thing once and she left me, or she used it against me, but I listened to her complain all the time, were asking their partners for reassurance or love or compassion or whatever, and they were not getting it. But they were being used as a sympathy well. I guarantee you, because I know people in my real life. Who have been in relationships like those, and the men are going, she left me out of nowhere. I had no idea she was going to leave. And I can look back at that relationship and point out at least 20 times where I thought she should have left him already and didn't. Because she's not an appliance, she's not a sympathy well. Don't use her as one. Talk to the other men in your life, please. And tell the other men in your life to stop listening to stupid twats online who say that men can't cry, because that's the most bullshit thing I've ever heard in my life. Next. This was a really sweet one actually, and it says, how should men be adapting to the changes in modern world? And I haven't really got a discussion on this one. I can chuck some things out there, but no one who's listening to this probably cares. I wanted a feminist perspective on this because this sub constantly opens my eyes up to perspectives I hadn't thought of before, which is very sweet. I'm a young man wanting to adapt to the 2025 and onward society. How do you think I should do it? If I had to, three massive things. One, pick up a hobby. Pick up a nice, good hobby that you can spend your time doing so you don't get sucked into an online vacuum of toxic masculinity, because I am sick and tired of seeing sweet, lovely little guys. That sounds really weird. Sweet, nice boys, sweet, nice men getting dragged into this toxic masculinity. 2, don't rush in trying to find a girlfriend, and don't think that the most important thing in the world is having relationships with women. It's really not. Value your friendships. Keep your friendships close. Have good, hardworking friends around you that are gonna, when I say hardworking, I mean for your friendship. And number 3, stay on the AskFeminists subreddit. And read Andrea Dworkin. There you go, 4. The top comment on this one is genuinely so sweet. The 3 are, work on emotional self-sufficiency. That's very true. Build emotional resilience, true, and learn to genuinely community build and find platonic friendships. That is incredibly true. This next one made me want to pull out my hair and punch someone in the fucking face. So let's read it. If women are capable of knowing what they want and going for it, why don't we see more women asking men on dates? And he was labelled as low effort and antagonistic. If feminism is true, first of all, whoa, opening with if feminism is true. Do you not know what a school of thought is? Do you not know what an ideology is? Because it's not a religion. Someone commented, bitch, this ain't Christianity. Like, someone said, if feminism is true, dude, it's not Christianity. It's a lens we use to evaluate our past, present, and future social conditions. It's not a made up thing. I mean, everything's a made up thing, but it's not like, it's just a way of seeing things. Anyway, if feminism is true, that women are capable of doing what men do and can lead and be risk takers, etc., just like men, why with the increase in incentives for women to not be leaders and incentives for gender fluidity, women are still not pursuing men and still not paying for dates? I've never witnessed or heard any stories, as far as I know, of women asking a man out on a first date, planning it, then paying for it. There's many other inconsistencies I see. For example, we don't see a surge of women going into male-dominated fields such as construction or the military. Are women leaders, or are they designed to be led by a man? Because women's actions seem to be showing that they don't want to act like a man, even if given the opportunity. So you should be very glad you're on the screen right now so I don't slap you across your face, because that was one of the most stupid things I've ever read in my entire life. Women don't want to act like men. Women want to be treated the same as men are. Women want to have the same opportunities as men. Now, this is a very big difference. This is the difference between, one of the big differences, I think, between liberal schools of thought and socialist or Marxist schools of thought. Equality of outcome and equality of opportunity are very different. So he's looking at equality of outcome. Why are there not CEOs not 50-50? Why is the military not 50% women, 50% men? Why isn't construction 50-50? And I can't tell you exactly why women don't want, I can tell you why I don't want to go into construction, and it's because I want to go work in a research job. Like, that's just the way it works. The entire question of why aren't women acting like men, they clearly want to act like men. They don't want to act like men. They want to act like human beings, as equal human beings, and be given the same opportunities. And when given those opportunities, gone through those opportunities, they have the same outcome, which is the same level of praise, which is the same opinions placed on them. And none of that happens. And the whole thing of, I've never seen a woman ask a man out on a date or pay. I've done that. Women in the comments were going, hey, me and my husband, we've been married a really long time. I asked him out on the first date and I paid. There you go. Like, it's probably because this man doesn't know any women. Clearly doesn't know any women, because if he had known any women, he'd had a conversation with them about this and wouldn't have written the stupidest Reddit post I've ever seen. This woman made a very good point and said that I tend to pursue the men I'm interested in simply because I do not like wasting time and playing games. I have also paid for many a date. And then someone else said, because the vast majority of men don't interest me romantically. And someone said, maybe because what they want isn't to ask men on dates. I've asked men out before. Do I do this often? No. I meet very few men I would like to spend alone time with. I also pay for dates, especially first ones. And it's if you post something on Reddit, how has he not deleted this? This was like 20 hours ago this was posted. How has he not deleted this? I would have deleted this and written a formal fucking apology already, because this is insane. This is insane to me. That this is what you think feminism is, if it's true. Talking about that one at the moment because I don't think he deserves my time. I genuinely don't. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and people in the comments trying to educate him, he's not replying to any of them, not talking to any of them, and I doubt he will. This one's about 5 days ago, and it's a very good question, and it says, how do you feel about a guy taking women's gender class? Hi, I'm considering taking a women's studies class next semester. I've been on a journey of bettering myself, and it seems like taking women's studies class would be a good option. I feel it would be a good topic to be educated on and will help me understand people better. I just imagine it would be mostly women, and it would make some uncomfortable with me being one of the hopefully few or only guy in the class. Thoughts on the topic would be appreciated. If I went into a women's study class and there was just one man there and he was taking it seriously, that's the thing. I mean, he's not sitting on his phone the whole time or like only there to like chat BS about everything that we're reading. He was genuinely there to learn and better educate himself. I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think it's a very positive thing and it's a good thing. And if I scroll into these comments and I see one fucking person saying, why would you do that? Don't do that. That's weird. That's, hang on. This is one small caveat. Perhaps be aware that there are certain types of men that do take class or seek environments that have high women to men ratio for particularly predatory reasons. Be sensitive to that with your peers. That is incredibly true, that you need to be wary when going into these, because if I walked into a women's studies class, I'd expect it to be mostly women and my teacher to be a woman and to be sitting with only women, and if I did see a man in there, I'm not sure if I'd feel positively, but that's because I have the best. I always try and assume the best of people and think that they're only ever doing things for good reasons, which has stabbed me in the back more than once. I'm incredibly naive. I did a gender, sexuality and society class. There's this one guy, he constantly argued with the lecturer. Don't be that guy, otherwise you're very welcome. Like, that's very, very much true. Education is amazing for everyone on every single subject and topic possible, and I think the more that you try and educate yourself on things, the better of a person you are. But this one's funny. Do not, under any circumstances, try to romance any of the girls in the class. Don't try and flirt with them. Don't try and hit on them. Don't try and do anything, because they are going to think that you're there for bad reasons, and you seem really nice. I haven't read this one, but I'm going to read it now because I saw the title. and it's about Blue Origins. I skipped Hot and Cold on my Spotify the other day because she was pissing me off, so I'm going to read this one. Thoughts on Blue Origins, Katy Perry's all-female flight in the erasing of Valentina Tereshkova's legacy. Fuck, I fucked that up. That was so bad. I'm a man who supports feminism, but I feel quite annoyed about the recent Blue Origin all-female flight featuring Katy Perry. While it's being celebrated as a historical milestone for women, the 11-minute suborbital trip felt more like a narcissistic PR stunt than meaningful progress. It also comes off as tone deaf at a time when Trump is actively destroying real academic opportunities for women in STEM. But what really bothers me is how Katy Perry, Blue Origin, and much of the media presented it as the first all-female space flight, effectively erasing Valentina Tereshkova's legacy. She wasn't just the first woman in space, she flew solo, orbiting Earth 48 times over nearly 3 days in 1963, fully in control of the mission. That was the real first all-female crew. Even if it was a crew of one, Katy Perry just entered a rocket. Literally anyone could do that. Am I overacting by feeling triggered over this? No, you're not, and I completely agree. I think that this is one of the most white feminist things I have ever seen in my entire life. Oh, I'm so rich and I'm gonna pollute the earth so much for no reason and go to space for 11 minutes. I'm gonna get back and I'm gonna kiss the ground. And I've learned real empathy and connected and how we're feeling so connected. Saying dumb fucking shit that most normal average people could felt when they were 12. I learned that level of empathy when I was 9. I learned the meaning of life when I was 6. And my chicken died. It's not difficult to be a famous person and not be a knob. To be rich, like Katy Perry rich, is unethical. All billionaires are unethical and multimillionaires are unethical. She makes it so much worse. She's also a horrible person. She's still working with Dr. Luke, and if you know anything about Dr. Luke and what happened with Kesha, you know why it's so horrible that she's still working with him. And had the audacity that when Wendy's made a snarky tweet saying, can we send Katy Perry back to space, she said, degrading, going against a woman, where she is working with one of the most disgusting misogynistic music producers of the last 50 years, you know? And yes, it was a complete PR stunt, publicity stunt, with the fakest, most white feminist, liberal feminist shit I have ever seen of the first female crew. And you're right. It was not that they were not the first female crew. The first female crew was Miss Valentina. My camera died. My camera always dies. I feel like I believe what I was saying was that it's so unfortunate that I don't know as much about the actual first woman in space. And I know more about Katy Perry's 11-minute PR stunt. Someone made a really good comment that says, a ride on Blue Origins is more like a roller coaster than a space flight. The passengers are just that, passengers, not trained as astronauts. It's a rich person's joyride. And the OP says exactly, thank you. Tereshkova was a true pioneer. It was the longest solo flight at the time. I can't even imagine how scary it must have felt to do what she did. Tereshkova is genuinely an amazing woman. She's incredible. And it's so unfortunate that I know more about Katy Perry's space trip than I do hers. I'm actually going to say something quite funny, which is that many people are poking fun at her space trip, like Camille Cabello apparently, and she's actually cancelled some of her concerts due to the backlash that she's been facing from the space flight. Didn't she announce her set list in space and now she's cancelled them? I don't know. Also, please don't get mad at me for calling it white feminist. I know the women she didn't go with were white. That's not what I mean when I say white feminist. But a lot of people are making really good points, no one actually invests in feminism, thinks of this as anything but a selfish display by people with too much money and not enough empathy. If they actually cared about women, they'd be investing in organisations that are trying to get our rights back and not in showing off how much money they have to waste on egotistical jaunts to space just because they can. I think that's completely true. I always think that a lot of people are very much overlooking the fact that it's horrible for the environment, something that we know celebrities don't care about. Looking you right in the eyes, Travis Scott. But yeah, also just to add on to the fact that, opportunities for women in STEM have been narrowed immensely since Donald Trump came into power in the States, and they're doing this and acting as if it's a good thing, big thing for women in STEM when it's not, is completely ridiculous and completely an egotistical jaunt, as that guy said. But yeah, that's all. Love you and appreciate you. I'm thinking of doing this again because it's almost really fun and I like talking about things that I'm passionate about, and this is one of them. But yeah,